Welcome to Retro Scale Modelling. This is part 7 of Airfix's Hadley Page Victor K2 SR2. Scale is 172. In part 7, I'm going to be putting all the finishing touches to the build. So the canopies, the painting and the decals are all going to be covered in this video. Now, the painting itself is not going to be in great detail, just the basic points that I'm mentioning on this particular part. Now, the reason for that is because I'm going to be going into more detail in another video in how I paint, and I'm doing the separate video from this, so that's something I'll look into. But this video does cover the basics of the actual paint itself. So let's jump into this and see how well I get on. To start things off, I'm starting to paint the camouflage, and the main colour for this is Humbrol's 165 Medium Sea Grey. Now, I always start with the lighter colour first when I'm painting a camouflage. That is because if you make a mistake, it's easier to paint over from the darker colour. So if you're having to paint over the darker colour, it'll take a couple of coats. If you're painting over the lighter colour, obviously it takes less coats. So what I'm doing here now is just marking out the areas that I want to be camouflaged. And the pattern I'm using is just roughly what the illustration on the paint guide is. It won't be precise, but I think it'll be good enough. I'm placing little dots within just to show me what areas I want to paint in a certain colour. But there's a good chance I'll be changing that as I go along. But as you can see there, I've already painted in now the block colours. And I've used a small brush for this just because I don't want it to be too thick on the actual lines themselves. Of course, this will mean that I'll need another coat, but I was going to always need a couple of coats anyway. But the small brush, it makes a little bit more work, but it is worth doing. But before you put on your second coat, it's a good idea now to put on your next colour. So this is what I'm going to do. And that will be Humbrol 163 Dark Green. And that's the colour I used for the canopy as well in part 6. So like with the lighter grey, I'm just going to start off with the edges and put the first coat down. And the first coat is very thin, and that just enables me to marry it up with the actual paint it's already done there without raising the level, so I'm not going to be getting a step as such. So you can see it all there now. It's just about dried, and it's about ready now for the next coat. And for this coat of paint, I'm not putting a lot of paint on my brush at all. It's quite thin, and I'm just putting the paint on and dragging it down into one direction if I possibly can to build up that colour. Now, depending on how thin you put this paint on, I'll dictate how many coats you'll need. This will need 2, possibly 3 coats. It all depends, again, how much paint I actually have on the brush at the time. So as you can see here, I'm just about putting the last finishing touches to the pattern, but using the same technique. This actually took 3 coats in the end in total. If you do go over your markings, as long as it's not too far over, it shouldn't be a problem. It's not the end of the world if you do go out of bounds. All you have to do is just make the edge a little bit sharper. And you can do that with your brush, or even with an airbrush if you're using an airbrush as well. But the key, as always, is thin coats all the way to build up that colour. So don't worry if you're having to put on multiple coats when you're painting camouflage like this. It's all part of the process to bring up that colour that you would like to see. So again, I left this to dry overnight, and now it's time to remove the masking tape. Now, because again I've varnished this masking tape, I may tear. Yeah, there it is, just like that. But it's not a problem. It will come off as leaving a straight line. If you do get any paint bleeds, and you may get some depending on the surface of the area that you're painting, it should be easy enough to to fix because the paint is going on so thin. If you put the paint on too thickly, then you would have to sand it all down the area that's had the paint bleed and start again. But because it's going on thinly, you can comfortably paint over it. But as you can see there, it's a nice straight line that I've achieved. So next it's time to place on the instrument panel, then the canopy. Now for this I'm using the crystal clear cement even to put in the instrument panel that I've just placed in. I wasn't a great camera angle, so I do apologise for that, but it just slots in at the front of the opening there before putting on the canopy. Now the reason why I placed it on with using the canopy glue, well, it's because of the fumes. I didn't want it to fog up the canopy. The tail section wings are next to go on. This was a little bit awkward to fit. There's not a big contact point for them. It looks quite large, but it's actually only a very thin line that you're bonding together, and it's sort of not very well balanced. So I had to hold this for a good 20 minutes for it to set properly. Then it was time for the under part side of the canopy. Now I forgot to paint this on camera. I did show you a picture of it in the previous build at the end of the video, but I did actually realise I hadn't recorded painting it, and it's just the white lines to match the underside of the model. But as you can see there, I'm using a little bit of canopy glue just to place it on. And there's no location points as such with this, it just pushes on directly underneath the nose area. Then on the front part of the canopy there's a little nose cone, and that's painted in the 163 dark green also, and that just gets pushed into the nose cone like so. Then there is a larger probe that goes on top of the canopy, and that's also painted in the 163 dark green. I'm using the canopy glue once more to secure this. It's quite a big location area for it, so you shouldn't have any problem fitting it. Although I should say the fitting was a little bit tight, so you may wish to file the end down a tiny bit just to get it fitted. Now this part here, I actually forgot to place it on when I put the landing gear in, the front part of the landing gear. It's the wheel guard. However, it was really easy just to rectify and just pop it in. There was no drama. It's just one of those things that I forgot to put in. So now I'm going back to the probe, and the tip of this has to be painted, and I'm using for this Umbro 11 silver, and that's just for the tip of the actual probe itself. That's everything attached now, so it's time to varnish. So I'm going to be using, as you can see, a Pledge Clear Polish to give it its main varnish. So once the varnish is completely dry, it's time to put on the decals. And as you can see here, once more I've sped up this process because it's decals. They're fairly easy to put on. If you've never done a decal before, you need a little bit of warm tepid water, a good decal solution. I'm using Micro Set, and this helps soften up the decal, and it conforms to the surface of your model, so it will shrink into panel lines, uneven surfaces. Now you don't really have to use this stuff if you don't want to, but it does help settle the decal. Now on these decals, I had a few problems with them. Some of them were too thin and others were too thick. The roundels were too thick. The lines that I'm putting in here at the moment that you can see on screen, those were extremely thin and very finicky to put on. I had to put my magnifying glass on, that's what's on my head there, to just try and zoom right in to see what I was doing with some of them, because they were very, very small. And that was the stencil ones as well. There was quite a lot to put on there in the end. And it took a course of 3 days in total to put all the decals on. So it's quite a long, lengthy process. And as I'm putting these decals on, as you can see, I've slowed it back down to normal speed. This is where I'll end the video, and actually this will be the end of the build. So the next part will be the final reveal. So if you haven't done so already, why don't you check out the channel for my other builds? If you subscribe to the channel, please do so. Hit the notification bell, that way you'll be kept up to date with all my other builds in the future, as well as for the final reveal of this one, of course. Hit the like button, don't be afraid to leave a comment, and of course, you can share the video. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. Bye bye.